We would like to start our day today by welcoming you all here, but also acknowledging the land that we're meeting on. So we are in Toronto. I had to check where I was. This land is the territory of the Mississaugas of New Credit, Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. And we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in this community on this territory. Last night at the opening reception, we met with, we had Chief Stacy LaForme there, and he said he would like to see in the land acknowledgement something written up about the territories. I forgot to do that. So next time we'll work on that. I'm the president of the OMA this year, and we welcome you to the OMA's Annual Conference 2018, and we are really thrilled about the amount of participation we have from folks coming from all across the province and all across Canada. And at this time, I have the joy and the pleasure to introduce Carolyn King. Carolyn King is our knowledge holder for this year's conference, and she's here to help us open the conference. Many of you have met Carolyn King at other events that the OMA has hosted. She is the former chief of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, and she completed one two-year term in political office from December 1997 to December 1999. She is also the first woman ever to be elected as chief of her First Nation. She is currently the sole proprietor of JDI Business Services, where her goal is to be a facilitator / resource person for the Aboriginal First Nation peoples in Canada. Put your hands together and help me welcome Carolyn King.
Honey, Dijnakas Carolyn King, as you buy in New Credit. In the Anishinaabe language, I said hello, and that who I am and where I live. So I live, it's like a 2-hour drive yesterday. So we're south of Hamilton, and that's where we moved from this land. So when we, so many groups now are now taking up the land acknowledgement. The Toronto District School Board implemented it, I think, last year, or yeah, it's been over a year, and that so all children, classrooms now hear that statement or read that statement. So I'm a member of the Mississaugas of the Credit. You know, we're trying to transition and to take out the new Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. So thank you very much for the acknowledgement. And so I will officially welcome you to the land as a member and as a descendant of one of my grandmothers is a Mississauga, and that Etobicoke. And there's a town named Etobicoke. There's a creek named Etobicoke. Well, I'm part of the Etobicoke family, so I have a direct lineage right to the original people of this area and further back to all of the places that we lived before. So I can officially say that I'm an official, and that so welcome to the, as they call it, the treaty lands and the territory of the Mississaugas. I'm honored to be here today, a privilege to be here and be part of your group, Museums Association, to say a few words. And that's so, Chimigwech. And Chimigwech in our language has been interpreted to be thank you. I was talking to an elder in the north, and I said to him, because I'm not a speaker, I said to him, Chimigwech. And he looked at me and he said, do you know what that means? And I said, thank you. And he said, well, it means more than that. It means I give myself to you. Miigwech. So where do we start? Collaborating for the support, not business as usual. Collaborating for impact, sorry. I've been thinking about today and what I would say. And we talked about the introduction as the JDI Business Services. That's my business name, and it stands for Just Do It. And so people, and it's part of my radio station building days. And I picked up a little banner down in Florida, and it said, "Just do it." And so that's my mantra. And so when people say, "Isn't that the Nike slogan?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, means I just did it." So we're also taking, trying to take new paths as the First Nations. In my other side of business, as the promoter of visualization, my moccasin, thank you for letting me put up my moccasin identifier project, because I want to change the world. I want to change our world. And that little project, and by all means come around, talk to me about what I think our future should include. So one of the things that in my work, the other thing that I do is relationship building between First Nations and municipalities. We have a group called Shared Path Consultation Initiative that I'm the president of, and it's about trying to educate the people, the municipalities, the organizations, about who we are, where we are, and why we are. So, and that's a big challenge. So when I talk about where do we start, I'll challenge you. Look in the bag. Look in the bag that got handed out. Are we in there? Did you see us in there? I didn't see us. You look at that Tourism Toronto book. I found one place that there was a picture that represented Indigenous, and it was with the ROM, had a picture of a shirt. The one that has information is the Heritage Matters booklet. I was just skimming through. I was looking for me. I didn't see me. So where did we start? Let's start with recognition that we were there and we're still here. And that as we go forward, when we talk about collaboration, I think it has to include that recognition and the respect that the First Nations are here. I was asked a question when I'm talking. How many First Nations in Ontario? Sometimes it's just blank. I don't know. How many First Nations that have an Indian reserve in Canada? I just did the University of Waterloo. Nobody knew the answer. It's time that we started to recognize that we are still here and that we have our lives and all of our history. And then if we don't start to address that in a good way and for the changing the future, I think there's going to be continued conflict. So when we talk about the recognition, it's a start. People are saying they want to do more now, but it's a start. We were at the Fort York Indigenous Festival last year and had our booth up. And these three young girls, about 10 to 12, I'd say, come forward, and they were looking at my moccasin identifier material. And I said, "What do you learn about the First Nations or the Indigenous people in school?" And they looked up and they said, "We do the opening every morning." And they stood together and they pronounced it. And I said, "That's great. That's great." And I said, "Do you know that all of us here are Mississauga Indians or Indigenous people?" And the little girl goes, "Oh, are you real?" We got a long way to go. So where do we start? And starting to include us and collaborate with us, I think that's a good start. Chimigwich.
Thank you so much for that. Carolyn, it's wonderful to have you here. Carolyn's going to be available throughout the conference to answer questions about local Indigenous cultural information and issues. I encourage each of you to find time to meet with this woman. She's just absolutely amazing. I would now like to invite up Mike Williams, who is the General Manager of Economic Development and Culture for the City of Toronto. Please come forward. As General Manager of Economic Development and Culture, Mike Williams is responsible for leading the team that contributes to an economically strong and culturally vibrant city with a high quality of life, advancing Toronto's prosperity, opportunity, and livability. And he also gets to work with the fabulous, of course I'm right in the middle of everyone and can't even think of your name. Cheryl Blackman. Cheryl Blackman, Chief Passion Officer. I almost asked her ex-boss Joss last night if he misses her, but of course he does. It was too painful for him to talk about. So please come up, Mike. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Petal. I was going to talk about two things this morning. I'm going to talk about three things because I think the land acknowledgement that we do, and sometimes it becomes a little road. I can go real quick through it all, but it's vital, and this group of all groups should be the leading in that world of recognition of everything. In Toronto, we have the treaty relationship with the Mississaugas. We are home to many of the groups that were already mentioned. We're also home to many, many different Indigenous groups, including the Métis, Inuit, etc., who've moved to Toronto and become part of the urban fabric and struggling at times to manage that relationship in a city like Toronto. We as a city are a long way away from properly respecting the partnership and revering the stewardship involved, but we are getting there. I don't know if you've had a chance to take a picture of the famous Toronto sign, but we have a medicine wheel next to that in the same honor as the maple leaf, which is also important to the Indigenous peoples. So I think, and we have a person and a group now that reports directly into the city manager, run by Selena Young, who is Indigenous herself, obviously, and I think having a real impact on city government in terms of understanding and appreciating all of the nuances and complexities that we're often not very sensitive to. So appreciate your comments, and any advice that you can give to us is very, very welcome. Two things I want to, first of all, thank you very much for coming to the conference. Thank you very much for coming to Toronto. You still are in Toronto here at the Prince, by the way. You haven't left the city. And the city is much, much more than the downtown. So I'm really great. I think it's great that you're here at the Prince and in North York. It's an important recognition of the fact that the city is many, many parts and not just the downtown. Also, thank you for what you do. I think it's vital for us to celebrate and learn from each other and to respect all aspects of it. My title, which is Economic Development and Culture, is one of the few, was probably one of the first places in North America to put those two together so openly and so proudly. There are a lot of places now that are starting to also do that, and that's for many different reasons. And one of the reasons is that it's sort of at the junction of the same, two sides of the same coin, and the coin being creativity, innovation, and the heartbeat of a city or a town or a municipality of any size. Because if you take it into a commercial realm, then you go into business and economic development, and if you take it into arts and culture, including museums and all of the different elements of the museums and heritage world. It also is very self-serving. a big part of economic development. Jobs follow, first of all, I'll start with the premise, jobs follow people. Some people follow the job, but most often in the growth of cities and places, jobs follow people, and people go where they want to live and grow up and celebrate their lives together. And they do that not because of just the job. They do that because of what's around them. And that, being around them, is often culture. So the kids have moved to downtown Toronto because they want to be where the nightlife is. They want to be where the entertainment is. They want to be where they can learn things. They want to be where people are gathering together and having fun. So they move there, and now you see a huge growth in jobs in the big towers in downtown, because that's where the people are. And we have companies moving downtown from the suburbs who 25 years ago followed the people to the suburbs, 50 years ago followed people to the suburbs. Now they're moving back downtown because the millennials and everybody else that wants to enjoy the vibrancy of a downtown area are moving downtown. And we now see that all across. It's not a unique Toronto phenomenon anymore. It's common across Canada, common across North America. I also wanted to talk about a couple of things and that sort of go first circuit for where I started off. In our division at Toronto, and I'm standing looking at all the badges there. I might as well be here because everybody I work with is here, it seems to me. But Cheryl leads a group with a team with Joanne Pinn. I haven't seen Joanne this morning. Dave O'Hara, Jennifer Harrington, and Wayne Reeves. Wayne was there last night. I don't know if he's here this morning. I saw Jane French, a big part of the reaching out to the Indigenous peoples. Jane started that a bunch of years ago, making the trek down to the Brantford area. So in our division, we have 4 pillars to the way we go about doing things now. The first and most important one is diversity and inclusion. I'll come back to that. The second one is space and access. I'll come back to that because you all are part of the space world in municipalities. Operational excellence goes without saying. A lot of the exhibits outside are on how technology can help us all do our job better, and we need to do a better job across the city in adopting technology. And fiscal sustainability is a big part of that. I don't know what, some municipalities seem to be rolling in money. Other municipalities like ours seem to be struggling for money all the time. And so trying to figure that out as well. So in diversity and inclusion, shared experiences are very important there. So if I go to the Scarborough Historical Museum, I may be the only white person there that day if there's a class of kids from Scarborough, because they're all from different parts of the world and not from the part of the world that my parents came from. But they share the experience of being an immigrant with the same experiences that pioneers and early settlers had here. And they share the same prejudice and biases that those people faced and many other people faced. So the museum environment is a critical environment for people to understand shared experiences. Probably the most, I wanted to pick up also, I'm probably going over time, I apologize, I'll be over in a couple of seconds. 2 other points, and Josh raised this yesterday. For different periods of my life, I was a consultant, and I did work for Parks Canada. Anybody here before I say this, I better find out if anybody from Parks Canada is in the room. 1 person from Parks Canada, 2 people from Parks Canada. Well, don't take this as an insult. And it'd be interesting whether you agree with me or not. So I worked on a big strategic study for Parks Canada a long time ago. And I quickly figured out that Parks Canada fell into 2 camps. And there's one camp, which I'll call the preservationists, that thought the best way to guarantee that we had pristine wilderness was to make sure that nobody went in that pristine wilderness. Except, of course, some of the park wardens who got to enjoy it all on their own. Then there's the other camp that said the best way to make sure that we preserve pristine wilderness was to educate people of how important it was. And the only way you could do that was to give them wilderness experiences. And I fall very strongly in the second example, that we need to program and we need people to understand and appreciate and we need to educate. And we cannot do that by keeping people out of the pristine wilderness or away from the exhibits. In my view, we need to share the experiences. The last comment I wanted to make was the skill and the ability that we have to make sure that when people visit it, and whether it's an archive, a museum, historical house, an interpretive center, a preserved site, an archaeological dig, whenever people visit those places, they have to have a good experience. And because if we in Toronto, at any one of our 10 historical houses, including the fort, create a bad experience for people visiting it, then they're not going to want to go to a museum in Toronto or anywhere else. When people go to places, they need to have in the back of their mind, I want to go to a great restaurant, I want to go and take a great picture of a nice sign in downtown Toronto's front of City Hall. I want to go to a couple of sites. I want to visit places that matter. I want to go to a museum. I want to go to a historical site. And it all rolls off their mind all the same way. And that's all our collective responsibility, to make sure that those experiences are worth repeating in different places. And that's the value of having a conference like this, because then you all get to share the knowledge and wisdom and what works and what doesn't work. And with that, good luck for the rest of your conference. Thanks very much for coming to Toronto.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Paul Robertson, Vice President of the OMA, and I would like to thank you, Mike, for your words to us this morning. And the OMA is particularly grateful to the City of Toronto for its tremendous support and contribution to this year's conference, as well as the staff and volunteers of the Toronto History Museums and the many members of the Toronto Museum Network. We were last in Toronto way back in 2010, and it's a pleasure to be back here in this wonderful place to experience, we hope, the diverse aspects of this city, as you were describing, Mike, and I think which is going to contribute to a fantastic conference this year. We hope everyone who signed up for the study tours yesterday enjoyed them, as well as, of course, last night's opening reception and trivia night at the ROM. Thank you to two City of Toronto sites, Todmorden Mills and Montgomery's Inn, as well as the Black Creek Pioneer Village, the Archives of Ontario, and Emilio Genovese for hosting and contributing to yesterday's study tours, and to the ROM, Reich and Petch, the University of Toronto Faculty of Information, and Go EMP for their contribution to last night's opening reception and trivia night. Last year, we were privileged to host this conference in Kingston. And as such, we recognize that putting this together takes a lot of work. We are really grateful to our partners for all of their support in making this conference this year possible. And I mark Total Fine Arts, City of Toronto, Canadian Museum of History and the Canadian War Museum, the Royal Ontario Museum, Ingenium, Marsh Canada Limited, Redpath Sugar Museum, Reich and Petch, Armstrong Fine Arts Services, University of Toronto Faculty of Information, PACART, Lord Cultural Resources, and ERA Architects. And now I have the honor and pleasure of introducing my colleague on OMA Council, Cheryl Blackman, a Director of Museums and Heritage Services at the City of Toronto and Chair of this year's conference.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Paul, for the welcome, and thank you to Carolyn King. Your words move me. It's one of those moments when we say things like nothing for us without us, and you really brought it home. So thank you for that, and it really is the call to all of us to walk in a good way. And I'm looking forward to being able to work with you and to work with fellow members of the community, and to move the museum's community forward, and so that you don't come to any other conferences or events and not see yourself represented. So thank you. So just to continue in the vein of giving thanks, 4 months ago I joined the City of Toronto Museums, and I came on board the program committee for this conference, and I was fortunate to have joined a strong and dedicated program planning team. So I'm going to call the names of the program committee. When I call their names, I'd like them to stand up and be acknowledged, and I'd ask that we give them a round of applause, but at the end, once I go through all the names, please. So thank you to Amy Bowring, Director of Collections and Research at Dance Collection Dance. Kendra Campbell, Curatorial Assistant, Museum of Toronto. Liz Driver, Director, Curator, Campbell House Museum. Diane Pellicone, Project Assistant, Royal Ontario Museum, Go EMP. Sasha Priva, Assistant Vice President, Strategic Initiatives and Partnership, Royal Ontario Museum. Wayne Reeves, Chief Curator, Museums and Heritage Services, City of Toronto. Wendy Rowney, Assistant General Manager, Black Creek Pioneer Village. And Michael Wallace, Executive Director, Theatre Museum of Canada, who also chaired the Local Arrangements Committee. Can you please join me in giving these folks a round of applause? Thanks very much. So I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the local arrangement committees. This committee brings their local expertise and ideas to the conference organization, including the planning of this year's study tour. Once again, when I call these people's names, please stand up and be recognized. Richard Felto, Curator and Corporate Archivist, Redpath Sugar Museum. Jane French, Museum Administrator, Museums and Heritage Services, City of Toronto. Madison Hamilton, Toronto Sites Coordinator, Ontario Heritage Trust. Okay. That has to take precedence. Antonia Krajina, Assistant Curator, Campbell House Museum. So please give them a round of applause. Thank you so much for your support. So it's clear that events like this one can't happen without all the hard work of committees like the committees I just mentioned. So we have a tremendous thanks to give you for all the success this conference will bring, so thank you. So whether this is your first or 40th OMA conference, it's always nice to be around our fellow delegates. I'd like to invite Dr. Amy Barron, faculty member at Fleming College, OMA course director, and community programmer for the Scugog Shores Museums in Port Perry, to lead us in a short activity for an opportunity for us to get to know one another. Thank you.
All right. We're going to get to spend the next 2 days together, so this is a little chance to chit-chat amongst yourselves. I see many of my ex-students in the room, so you may recognize the first part of this. I'm going to tell you right now, before I tell you what we're going to do, please find yourself a piece of paper that you can tear out of something. You are going to use it and then be getting rid of it, so don't keep it. It's a good chance to get to know your fellows around you. If you don't have a piece of paper, you could ask to borrow one. That's it, sharing. Sharing is caring. There you go. Wonderful. All right. I'm also going to suggest that if you're in a table of just, 2 people, the people over here look sort of lonely, perhaps merge into another table for this. Find some friends. This is all about finding some friends. So if you're in a large table, that's fine, but if you're all by yourself, maybe find some friends. So here's what you're going to do. On that piece of paper, you are going to write down, you're going to think back as far back as you can. It's further for some of us than others, but think back as far as you can. Try and write down one of the earliest museum experiences you really remember? A good museum experience that you kind of think, yeah, that was something that really struck me to the core. So think back as far as you can and write down a museum experience. Just write 1, 2, 3 sentences that just describes that museum experience and why it was very, made that emotional connection for you. So you're going to write that on your piece of paper. Give you a moment to think and to write. Oh, I can see some people scurrying away very carefully and other people thinking. Good. Once you have written that down on your piece of paper, given it some thought, you are going to crunch that piece of paper up into a little ball. This isn't because I don't value the lovely thing you just wrote down. Just work with me here. You're going to crunch it up small. Crunch it, crunch it, crunch it. All the conservators in the room are going, that's not what you do to pieces of paper. You keep them safe and flat. No, smunch them. Excellent. Everyone hold up their piece of paper so I can see that you have a scrunched up piece of paper in your hand and that you are ready. Okay, good, good. Some people still writing and scrunching. Good, good. So this is where we're going to play nicely just within your table group. When I say go, you are going to throw the balls around your table at each other. Remember, we are not throwing like conservators. You are throwing like proper museum educators and programmers. Give it a little arm. Throw it at the people, but keep them within your table. Don't lose them. Are we ready? On your mark, get set, throw. Oh, come on, you can throw better than that. Excellent, excellent. Wonderful. And stop. Oh, now I can't stop some of you throwing now. John, I saw that. I said stop. All right. Now, I want you to pick up off the table in front of you one of the balls that's not your own. Pick up somebody else's little crunchy ball. You're going to open it. You're going to read it. And in discussion with the people at your table, you're going to try and figure out whose this story belongs to. Whose story is this? So read the stories and discuss. Excellent. I can tell by some of the laughs that some of those stories must have been something else. So, well done, everybody. I hope we continue to share stories and swap stories throughout this conference. You all did a really good job of working there together and following my somewhat strange instructions and playing along. And I hope you all did a really good job of sharing some meaningful stories, because in other words, you all basically collaborated with impact. So thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Sasha Prue, Associate Vice President of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships at the Royal Ontario Museum, to introduce our first conference keynote. Sasha.